Well met, everyone. I am Rich the Lich, and today I am doing a review on Eberron, Rising from the Last War. This is the most recently released, as of yesterday, official book from Wizards of the Coast. This is the entirety of the campaign setting in the world of Eberron. I'm going to run this through my review system of layout, design, and editing, art, and of course I'll talk about a lot of the content. This is going to be a big, long video today. So, to help keep some efficiency and maintain some semblance of sanity in watching this, I'm going to also put a bunch of different timestamps down in the description. So if you're watching this for the first time and there's a specific thing you're looking for, you can quickly navigate your way through those timestamps, or if you're watching this multiple times and you want to just kind of go back on some things that you may have missed, you can quickly navigate that way. At the end of all of this, I hope to inform you as to whether or not this might be a campaign setting in a world that you might want to dabble into, something that might be a good fit for you and your gaming group. Let's jump into it. What is on screen here is the digital version of Rising from the Last War, the new Eberron campaign setting. I believe it's something around 320 pages. I have purchased it in two formats, which is something that I rarely do. I typically buy a lot of the official content here on D&D Beyond because in my D&D prep time as a dungeon master, I like the ability to just quickly and efficiently search through monsters and look at different races and classes and whatnot. And then, of course, I share all this content with my gaming group. So I always purchase it on D&D Beyond because I just prefer that interface. But at the table, I will often just sort of cut and paste and print the various things I need. I don't like having a laptop or some sort of a digital interface as a barrier since I don't use a DM screen at all. But in this particular case, I'm really excited about the world. I think you've seen the hints of that as I've made a bunch of videos leading up to this review. And I know that while I'm currently running in a different campaign setting in Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus, I will eventually run my players through this world. So as I said, I like having the efficiency as a dungeon master to prepare off of the screen here. I did purchase the book as well with the beautiful, just hold on. The beautiful alternate cover. So while the review that I'm talking about is going to mostly be the content aspect of everything, right? What are you going to get in this book? And what are my thoughts on who it might appeal to, various gaming groups and whatnot? Content is content. I mean, word for word, everything that's on screen is going to be the same stuff in the book. But I can comment a little bit as to the book craft and the quality. I don't ever feel like I have to. You've noticed that I've done a bunch of official reviews of Ravnica and Baldur's Gate and whatnot, where I never had an actual book. I just had it in D&D Beyond interface. As an official WotC book, the layout, design, and editing of this thing, the book craft, if you will, is going to be top-notch. I mean, there's a quality control. There's a group of people, I'm sure, that they are running through that are determining and making sure that, the binding is right. When I open this thing, it's not falling apart. Now, my book specifically, I think I just got a shit version of it because my first few pages are kind of wavy a little bit, But whatever, I think that's just the quality of my book. Maybe in shipping something happened. But the rest of it is really, really top-notch. It's as you'd expect. The cover's beautiful. This alternate art is really, really good. Let me see if I can... You know what? I'm just going to... That's the alternate art for this book. I've seen a few people, and I've already watched some reviews where, in comparison to the normal standard artwork that's on the regular book, this is completely far and away much better. I think a lot of people have said that. A lot of people have said that this has captured the essence of Eberron better. I'm appreciative of the other artwork again, or as well. There it is right there. I think they're both really good in their own regard. Anyway, I'm kind of rambling here. This is going to be a really long video, as I said, but the timestamps will hopefully help you get through this. I'm going to spend all of my time in this review, which is already going to be longer than my typical reviews, all on the content. I'm going to kind of gloss over the layout, design, and editing and the art because there is a sense it's an official book, right? So the expectation is this thing should be right, and it is, okay? Now, in that, I'm going to only talk about the aspects as they're showing up on screen here, which the interface visually, word for word, everything is the same as what's in the book, but what we're looking at visually is going to be delivered to you a little bit differently because I'm looking at it in screen format versus in a book. The wording in this book is a little bit smaller, but it's going to feel and fit along with every other book that's on my shelf. Okay? So, for layout, design, and editing, let's kind of just gloss over it real quick. I'm going to give this thing 2 out of 2 possible points. I love the front cover on that alternate cover book. I can click on view cover art. This is the front cover. I think the dinosaur kind of flips around to the back of the original, the standard edition book, I should say. Let's take a look at some other artwork that's throughout. So, chapter 6 is Friends and Foes, all the monsters, big bad guys. You've got the Dalkir, and it talks about those guys. Now, you're not going to always see artwork in every one of these things, but you see these new stat blocks and whatnot. So, you've got this, I think she is CR22. So, there's artwork there. You know, there's artwork here, the Mind Flayers and the whatever, whoever this guy is, and so on. So, you've got, some pieces of artwork. You've got new monsters, so you have new pictures of art. Of course, Wizards of the Coast has those resources, right? Some of the best concept art and illustrative artwork I've seen lately is the stuff that's on Magic cards. But Wizards, being one and the same, owning Magic, has those resources of pulling and saying, hey, you Magic artists, we need some art to throw in this Eberron book. So the artwork does have a little bit of inconsistency because they're rehashing some stuff. So there is a picture somewhere in here. I'm going to pull this up in the book real quick. It's somewhere in here. I think it's a little more. So this is really big. If I zoomed in on the interface, you can see it is above the section, or within the section of the last war. In my book, yeah, see? There it is. So it's double page spread. I think this is by the amazing Wayne Reynolds, who is I am a huge fan of his art. I've been a fan of his art since he was kind of the iconic style choice of artist for 3rd edition or something like this. So most likely, I think, when Eberron first came out in 3.5. So you're going to see some stuff like that, where if you just want to look at pretty pictures throughout the book or on screen and whatnot in the D&D Beyond interface, you're going to have this art style, and then it's contrasted with, this still feels a little bit like it, but it's a little more painterly, right? The brush strokes and the rendering is not fully done. And then you have something like this, which is a lot more, straight up fully rendered digital painted. You can tell the art style, at times it can be a little bit inconsistent because they're trying to bring in some of the original art, but I don't mind it so much because I'm looking at each art piece separately. Yes, there's always a cohesion that I talk about in some of my reviews where you want to have that consistency, but the quality of this is top notch. The quality of that Wayne Reynolds piece is also top notch. It's just a different art style, but what I guess appreciate and still think that it's still well done is that you're capturing some of the original artwork that kind of just have some iconic images for me. So in that regard, I think, while the art can definitely have a little bit of inconsistency for that, overall, the amount of artwork that's through here is pretty good. It is not as good as Ravnica. Ravnica had the last end, the section, had that sort of behind-the-scenes concept art, which was brilliant, brilliant stuff. There's a lot of just content where you're scrolling through pages and there's not a lot of pretty pictures involved. But where the art is, of course, you're looking at the best that it can be. And the maps, I'm not a huge fan of the maps. That is one, I guess, point of contention I have. So, this is beautiful. This captures, the essence. So you'll get few little sporadic pieces in here, but they'll really scream to what not Ravnica, what Eberron is about. The maps are sort of recycling kind of some old stuff that's out there. It's kind of a little bit of if it ain't broke, don't, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Now, with the book, regardless of which one you get, you will get a pullout. I butchered it too. I ripped the hell out of the map. You will get a map in the back. I'll grab it real quick off the shelf. So you'll get this guy. It's just, your normal poster thing. It looks very familiar to me. Okay, I'm going to pull that map up on screen. It's in the, obviously, as I said, everything that's in the hardcover book is here as well. But if I was to show you Khorvaire, there it is, the map. It zooms in only this much, which is not really usable. I can't see a damn thing on the towns and cities, but this is the map. It's mostly talking about the continent of Khorvaire, which is kind of the main continent. On the flip side of this, you'll see kind of the world, which is talking about the other continents that exist on the actual place. But here, look at this picture. This Quidditch thing. This is gorgeous. So as I said, all in all, there's a few spots where art is kind of just thrown in there and interspersed throughout. It's not a coffee table art book. It's not a monster manual or something like that. But where the art is, even though the styles can be a little bit different, when you have art that you can right click on and save as your wallpaper on your desktop, the quality is there. So because of a little bit of inconsistency in art styles, and because of the maps kind of being somewhat simple, I'm not saying unusable. You've got the normal treatment on any of there's like an adventure in here, right? And of course you have dungeons and different layouts and things like this. The normal treatment by Dyson Logos, I believe, where it's very familiar at this point. We know the general take on maps, but I would have liked to have seen like just something really new, especially in the maps, like another take on it. I really love like Critical Role's map, the one that was done, sort of their official thing. And it just has, I've seen some better quality stuff than this. This still feels to me, and if it is the exact same one, this feels 20 years old. It's well done, but just the font choice and the font use, it still feels, so I'm going to kind of put both up at the same time. Regardless. For art, I'm going to give this 2.5 out of 3 possible points. Just that half point of, I've seen some better stuff in some of Wizards' other books, especially the previous one I reviewed, which was Ravnica, which I think the artwork in there felt new and fresh to me. But it was the first time that they went from the Magic the Gathering setting into this, where here you're looking at something that already had a bunch of art from 3rd, 3.5, and 4th edition, and so on and so forth. So it's kind of a little bit of bringing some of that stuff in and adding in some new stuff, so on and so forth, that you're getting a little bit of that mishmash. So you're only losing a half point for that. Let's get into the good bits now. All right, let's start talking content. Now, let me give you before we get into the content, let's talk a little bit history, a little bit of backstory. But hold on, I've got Thanksgiving's coming up, so I got some pumpkin pie. Bit of Eberron history. I alluded to this in some of my previous videos. Somewhere around early 2000, 2002, Wizards of the Coast put out a contest to all creators, designers out there, where they were asking for people to submit their own D&D setting, their own world, right? Our Forgotten Realms, their version of it. And I think there was something like 10,000 plus submissions, and the winning entry was The World of Eberron by Keith Baker. He won, and as such, the Wizards put their resources behind it and did the full official treatment with Keith's heavy involvement, of course, and they created Eberron, which came out in 3.5, okay? If we look at Wayfarer's Guide to Eberron, this is what a lot of people lately, when I'm looking at the reviews and what people are talking about with Eberron Rising from the Last War, the book we're talking about here today, a lot of people are comparing. Why should I get Rising from the Last War? What's the difference? Wayfinder's Guide is not just like, a 30-page supplement. It's almost a 200-page book. So I think when this first came out, and it's been out for, I don't know, maybe a year now, a lot of people thought, cool, they brought Eberron into 5th edition. This is what we're going to use if we want to play Eberron, right? But what are the differences? And people are asking, well, what did they change? If I have Wayfinder's Guide already, do I need Rising from the Last War? So I'm going to be pretty exhaustive with this review and talk about not so much reviewing of the content, because I'll go ahead and reveal my hand to you right now. The content is 5 out of 5. It's official stuff. You're looking at a 300-plus page book of an entire campaign setting and world. And the reason why I say it's a 5 out of 5, because objectively, there's everything here. Subjectively, this may not be your style. You may not like that world. You may be looking for more of the Dark Sun. Yes, there are elements here, and I'll talk about that later, that you can get into that feel kind of old, gritty. You can still use that grim reality and that variant in the DMG where you basically don't ever heal and you hardly ever get a long rest. You can still do that in certain elements here, but it's more of a subjective thing whether this world is yours or not, but we can't deny the content that's within these pages, okay? So, rather than kind of giving more of a review score on the content, which I will give you some points, I'm going to talk more about what's actually here and compare it to what we already have. So first off, let's do a quick kind of talk through on Wayfinder's Guide. The introduction of it is right here. So this is by Keith Baker. And for me, I don't care who else, and I don't know his involvement on a Wizards of the Coast overall design level. I just know the dude created this world. So his words to me are gold and they're canon, period. No matter what direction Wizards might want to go with it from a sort of public marketing point of view, right? This book, this is Wayfinder's Guide, okay? This is the one that many of us may already have, and I'm trying to give you some background and setup so we know what are we comparing apples to apples here, and do you need both, and so on and so forth, or one or the other. This book the Wayfinder's Guide brings Eberron to the 5th edition of Dungeons & Dragons, providing an overview of the core themes of the setting and the rules to connect them to current campaigns. It explores the continent of Khorvaire and the great city of Sharn. The Wayfinder's Guide provides ideas and hooks for compelling adventures, as well as an appendix with a list of sources you can use to learn more about the setting. Basically, ways you can go back to looking at that original 3.5 book, right? If you want the true meat and nuts and bolts of the story and the background, that's the one you're going to want to get in PDF form or otherwise if you don't already have it. You can oftentimes go to like used bookstores and think there's a place called Bookman's here on the West Coast that you can find that stuff because it's 3.5, it's older content. But that's where you're going to get that. But of course, the mechanics of it all, you would need to have to do a bunch of wrangling to get it over into the current 5th edition rule set, which is kind of what this did. Now, moving on. Bear in mind, this book presents my current vision of Eberron. This is Keith Baker, the creator of Eberron, talking. This is the world I run at my own table and the way that I've converted its ideas to 5th edition. The game mechanics are usable in your campaign, but at this time they aren't officially part of the game and aren't permitted in D&D Adventurers League events. These mechanics will evolve based on player feedback. This is a living document, and as these concepts are refined, this book will also be updated for free, so you'll be kept up to date with any changes that are made to it. Beyond that, Eberron is your world as much as it is mine. I hope that this book provides you with inspiration, but don't be limited by these ideas or decisions, so on and so forth. So, it's basically the designer, Keith Baker, saying, I'm now playing in 5th edition D&D, and being that Eberron is my creation and my baby that I submitted to WotC 20 years ago during that contest, I want to bring the world of Eberron at my table, but I want to bring it into the mechanical rule set. And the Wayfinder's Guide was kind of the 5th edition version that hadn't been run through all of the resources at Wizards of the Coast yet to blatantly just straight out call it official content. So that's why it wasn't allowed yet. They started to take some of the classes and the races from Wayfinder's Guide, and of course from 3rd edition, its origin point, and bring it into like Unearthed Arcana. So it became things that DMs are always, of course, free to use whatever the hell you want. But it's not until this book yesterday that they basically said, we put it all together, and here's the official Eberron book. This is the newness. So if you're looking for the most official, the only official, what's changed, okay? The first thing that you'll get, Rising from the Last War, and I'm not going to go through all 300 plus pages of the book, okay? You're going to get Welcome to Eberron, so on and so forth. And then you're going to get a little using this book section where it tells you Chapter 1 details how to create Eberron characters. It offers race options and a new class, the Artificer. Chapter 2, an overview of the nations. Chapter 3 is focusing on Sharn, the City of Towers, which is basically the New York of Eberron. So it focuses on that one place. Chapter 4 provides ideas for adventures in Sharn. All the reviews I've seen have said that that is everyone's favorite section. That, for me, is the gold mine as a creative individual, as a dungeon master. Chapter 5 are any new magic items and treasures specific to Eberron, because there you're also dealing with the dragon shards and so on. And then Chapter 6 is kind of the new bestiary and the NPCs that come from this world. Okay? Now, as I said, I enjoy the interface here from the D&D Beyond aspect, because I can quickly search through Eberron monsters only and so on and so forth. Everything, I'm not really going to refer to this book anymore. This is the last time. Beautiful front cover. Go out and get it if that's what you want. Now, for content, the other thing it talks about a lot is like pulp adventure. So Eberron is a world of swashbuckling adventure. Whether you're a DM developing an adventure in the world or a player preparing to explore it, consider the following. It has exotic locations. Colossal ruins left behind by the giants of Zendrick. You have the warped landscape of the Mournland. You have the Underdark, basically, which is called Khyber. So on and so forth. So you have all of these things that you can create sort of you've got jungles, you've got areas that you can create dinosaurs, as you saw on the cover of the standard edition. It has this element where you can create sort of what you see in like the Uncharted video game series, very Tomb Raider exploration. Put your hat on, grab your whip, you've got Indiana Jones, okay? So it talks about that. You also have noir intrigue, so you have kind of this very hard-boiled detective work, because you've got Dragonmarked houses and you've got the various kind of corporations that oversee it. As I alluded to a little bit earlier, it's a little bit of the element of like what you see with the Guilds of Ravnica. I believe the Guilds of Ravnica is the best example of showing you how to create factions and merchant guilds ever. It is just so intriguing, and the Guilds of Ravnica are so different. So it is better done than the houses here. But the houses lend themselves to a little bit more if you want to go down that political road. So that's the first time that I kind of start to hint at the content in this world of Eberron is it can kind of go wherever you want to go with it. You can play in multiple different ways, while on the surface, the front covers and stuff can show us it's a little more high fantasy, it's a little more sci-fi-ish. And the original Eberron 3.5 had these things called hero points, where you're basically adding in extra, like imagine permanent bardic, not permanent, but uses of bardic inspiration from 5th edition, okay? I don't see that anywhere in the book, because one thing that this content is not doing is it's not blatantly railroading you or saying use this in order for it to feel like Eberron. And that's the greatest compliment and strength I can give to the overall content of this. And what I mean is, in the DMG, there's a variant on if you want very arcadey feel, right? If you want it to be, what is it? I think a short rest is like 5 minutes, a long rest is an hour, right? It's very heavy combat centric. People can use their hit dice and they get all their stuff back. Maybe you give them inspiration, you know what I mean? Like you can make it, the system of 5th edition is already relatively difficult to die, right? Old school is kind of, you get down to 0, you're just dead. I mean, video game wise, think of Demon Souls, Dark Souls, Bloodborne. You're just dead. It's done. Here, you fall, and then you still have like 3 rounds to possibly make some death saves. If you roll a 20, you automatically spring up, and not spring up, but you get, you're at 1, you stabilize, you've got Spare the Dying. It's difficult to die. And I know that the essence of Eberron can sometimes feel very high fantasy, arcadey, it's just fun, whimsical, it's got, high tech, all this other stuff. But you have the Mournland, which is, a region at war, Seer, I think it was called, and then no one knows exactly what happened. Some arcane catastrophe basically blew the damn city up, killed everybody, 1 million people within it, and it's now surrounded it by this shroud of fog, which can cause like disorientation effects, make you lost and wandering in the fog. It's like a weird, otherworldly shroud that surrounds it, and everything within it is called the Mournland, okay? And it's a very dark, there's not a lot there. There's not anything in there that you're going to go, yes, there's relics of the once former, civilizations and nation that lived in there, but it's a very dark feeling thing. So even though you're talking about the high fantasy Indiana Jones, if you exclusively play in the Mournland and around that area and tie into that background and storyline, you're now going to feel like you're playing in a little more of like Curse of Strahd, Barovia, right? Like very downtrodden. And in that, it doesn't say that you have to do one or the other. So it leaves the option open to go to the DMG and now use the gritty realism variant, where a long rest is something like 24 hours and a short rest is 8 hours. So I like that the world it offers you so many different places. You've got jungles, you've got prehistoric, you've got cities, you've got Sharn, which feels a lot like Ravnica, the city itself, all these multiple layers. And it even mentions you can have an entire, not just a gameplay session or an adventure, the entire campaign can take place within just the city of Sharn. And the various political machinations, and you might have a very roguish, noir, intrigue, investigative nature, but of course you've got things you can fight against and whatnot, all within Sharn. So Eberron offers a wealth of content. It almost feels like there's a bunch of mini worlds within, and each one is its own campaign. So for a pure value standpoint, what you're getting in this book, in this content, is multiple campaigns worth of stuff, because I can explore all of Sharn, or I can explore all of the darker parts, so the Mournland, and I'll find some other areas that are just shitty. And I'll do that and run that through with my group for 2 years in campaigns. And I'll feel like there's still parts where my players might say, dude, we've never even looked into this part of Eberron. We've never even got into the high flying ship, mechanical bits of artificer guilds and all this other stuff of Sharn. We've all stayed in the Mournland and very undead and dead and gothic and dark and, it's rainy and all this other stuff, right? So there's a lot of ways you can go with it. Obviously, you can go towards a cyberpunk element if you want to get very sci-fi. I mean, look at the front cover of that alternate. So that's sort of the introduction stuff, is it kind of tells you that Eberron can kind of flow in all these different ways. It does give us some history, but I have it here next to me, so I'm going to refer to it. If we look at I just said I wasn't going to use this anymore, but so real quick, folks, I mean, we're looking at Welcome to Eberron is on page 4. It kind of talks to you, the introduction of this is what's happened. And that goes to page 15. That is your background setting of Eberron. As I said, you've got 3.5 that you can go to really, the original one that you can go to, this book. That'll give you, the the pages and pages of introduction as to what's happening in the world and how we got here and what Keith Baker created, okay? So there you've only got, a little more than 10 pages to a dozen pages. That's it. Whereas the character creation section in this new Rising from the Last War is 80 pages or something like that, okay? So let's jump into that. Character creation, races. Let's take a look. We've got the Changelings. They are very... Actually, let me back up really quick. Okay, sorry. Some of the introduction, the background of Rising from the Last War, why is it called that? So there's been this war that's been standing for about 100 years or so. And the general place in the world and the timeline of this book, Rising from the Last War, is... It basically puts us in this place where the war is over now. And yeah, I loosely use the term, they're at currently a time of peace, because of course there's nations always kind of at each other's throats. But the bulk of the main war is over. And it's, what are the ramifications of those wars, of that long-standing war? What has it done to change the world versus both the environment and the people that live within it? What cultural things have come about from that? What organizations and factions are now... There's just a lot of moving parts. And how do people now live and thrive? Warforged, for example, they are forged for war. So if you're playing a Warforged character, or there's Warforged NPCs and factions and groups, how do things that were built solely for war now function in a peaceful world, so to speak? So that's the general vibe of sort of the sense of the timeline of where Ravnica is. And you can always do your own Google searching and go back to different editions, as I said, to figure out exactly how they got to war and what it meant, who was at war with who. So we've got Changelings. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the differences of the Changelings that were in the Wayfinder's Guide, which is kind of the pre-5th edition variant, versus this official one. Changelings, your charisma goes by 2, and one ability of your choice goes up by 1. Wayfinder's Guide, charisma goes by 2, and either dex or intelligence goes by 1. So this one's better. The new one is better because you get to choose which one. Age is basically the same. Alignment, it's kind of very ambiguous sometimes in this world, just like religion is, where you don't have to adhere to the tenets of a certain faith or whatever, otherwise you lose your spell power. So it kind of lets you play, which I think fits within the theme of Eberron overall, of you're not sure what style of game you're going to go into, so you can kind of play as you want, alignment-wise, and how you act, and it's not going to be detrimental, to the powers and the mechanical bits on your sheet. So alignment's basically the same, size basically the same. I do like that all of the sizes now, I think most of them, it offers you this sort of randomization thing to randomly kind of roll, like old school D&D, where it used to kind of find ways of adding in some random numbers to add up. Okay, that's how many inches your character is. So I like the randomness of that. Speed basically going to be the same thing. Now you've got something that used to be called change appearance, which is the idea of the changeling, kind of that doppelganger effect. It's kind of the same thing in essence, but it's now called shape changer. Okay, but the big difference is down here at the bottom of change appearance. Even to the most, this is the Wayfinder's Guide, so this was what was in sort of playtest 5th edition material. Even to the most astute observers, your ruse is usually indiscernible, and when other people are trying to discern if you're really in your true form or not, you get advantage on your charisma deception checks. That whole thing is just removed entirely, so I guess it's up to the DM to adjudicate how a player might be able to, or an NPC might be able to tell if you're shape changed or not. Changeling Instincts is the same. You gain proficiency with 2 skills. That's identical. Now notice, the Changeling in Wayfinder's Guide had these 2 abilities, one called Unsettling Visage and the other one called Divergent Persona. I'll let you Google that to your own content, or look it up on screen, pause here. There's a lot going on with those. That is removed entirely from the Changeling. That doesn't even exist anymore, okay? Let's take a look at another. So dwarves, elves, dragonborn, gnomes, half-elves, halflings, humans, the normal races, from kind of the player's handbook, they just talk about here, they give you a little bit of introductions of sort of, that's it. Look at the Dragonborn section. That's all. Dwarves, there's not a ton, okay? It kind of just talks to you about sort of how these normal player's handbook races fit within the world of Eberron, the kind of the introduction to that. They did the same thing in Ravnica. They always do that, right? So obviously you can play all those other races, okay? But notice you don't have a lot of like the Volo's Guide stuff. DMs are always, of course, free to add whatever the hell they want, but you don't have the the Goliaths, right? You don't have Tabaxi, you don't have Kenku, things of this nature, right? But you do have goblinoids, where I did look through it. So you can play goblins, hobgoblins, and bugbears, and full-blood orcs as well. All right, folks, apologies for the change in camera, but you're here for my rambling, not for my beautiful face, so let's not worry about that. But I'm recording a lot, so I'm going to be running out of camera battery, where my webcam will be more efficient in this recording process. So let's move forward. We're looking at the Kalashtar. So let's take a look at the differences between what's in Wayfinder's Guide versus the Kalashtar as they are now within Rising from the Last War. So, traits. Ability score increase. In Wayfinders, your Wisdom and Charisma scores both increase by 1. In addition, one of your choice goes up by 1. The new version is your Wisdom score increases by 2 and Charisma by 1. So, I don't know which one is better, because you don't have a choice anymore. You're just pretty fixed now. It's Wisdom by 2, Charisma by 1 in the official edition. Age, basically one and the same type of thing. Alignment, like I said, size. Here's that random charts again to kind of create some cool randomization for how tall you are or how big you are. Speed's going to always be the same. Dual Mind, when you make a Wisdom saving throw, you can use your reaction to gain advantage on the roll. You can use this trait immediately before or after the roll, but before any of the roll's effects occur. That was in Wayfinders. The new one is significantly better. You simply now have advantage on all Wisdom saving throws. Straight up done. Wow. Mental Discipline, the same thing. Resistance to Psychic. Resistance to Psychic, they didn't take that away. Mind Link, check this one out. So, Mind Link was basically you can speak telepathically to any creature you can see. You don't need to share a language, blah, blah, blah. As a bonus action, when you're speaking, you can give that creature the ability to speak telepathically to you until the end of your next turn. Look what they did here. You can speak telepathically to any creature you can see, provided the creature is within a number of feet equal to 10 times your level. That's different than 60 feet. Okay? Also, when you're using this, you can use your action. Before, you used to use your... Sorry, that's a massive flash flood warning. Apparently, the Mournland is coming. So, also, before it was a bonus action in order to give the creature the ability to speak with you telepathically. Now it's using your action, but in Wayfinder's Guide, you allow that to happen until the start of your next turn. Now, you give the creature the ability to speak telepathically with you for an hour. Big difference there, okay? Psychic Glamour used to be a thing. Choose one of the following skills, and you have an advantage on ability checks that you make with those skills. That was in Wayfinder. Psychic Glamour does not exist anymore. Severed from Dreams, basically the same, how they sleep, whatnot, and languages, okay? Let's take a look at, as I said, there's those differences of your orcs are more intelligent here in Eberron, so you don't get the penalty as you would get from Volo's Guide. Half-orcs, I think, are one and the same. Now, shifters, let's see. Shifty. Okay. The big differences here are, so the shifter in Wayfinder's Guide is your dex increases by 1, and then the other stat changes were based upon what subrace you chose. Now, there is no flat. You don't, just being a shifter doesn't give you any ability score increases or adjustments. You just pick the Beast Hide, the Longtooth, the Swift Stride, or the Wild Hunt. They're all four the same ones that were in Wayfinder's Guide, but now by picking Beast Hide, your con goes up by 2 and your strength by 1. So let's take a look, kind of comparison. Picking the Beast Hide shifter, because you do pick one. You don't just pick a shifter, you pick a subrace. But if I'm a Beast Hide subrace, my con goes up by 2 and my strength by 1. Where previously in Wayfinder's Guide, your dex was a 1, increased by 1, but then by picking the Beast Hide, your con also went up by 2. So a Beast Hide was a con of 2 and a dex of 1. Now a Beast Hide is a con of 2, strength of 1. So there's some differences in that regard. You pick the actual subrace, and that's how you tell what your ability score increases are. Okay? Now the other thing is, as far as the bulk of what you get, age, alignment, size, again, that randomization. Speed is the same. Dark vision, you have that. You have the ability to shift. It's a bonus action, so on and so forth. I think the transformation is the exact same thing. A minute till you die, you get extra temporary hit points. All that stuff is the same. And you can't do so again until you finish a short or a long. Yes, it's the same thing. Languages, and then your subrace. The subraces, as I said, they're going to be a little different in point attribute ability score allocation because you've got those differences. This one used to be called Tough, but I feel like it kind of conflicted. I don't know if there's a feat that is called that as well. And Beasthide, now they call it Natural Athlete, but it does the same thing. You get proficiency with athletics. Same thing. You get +1 bonus to AC and 1d6 temporary. Same thing. Longtooth. Let's see. This guy is, as you pick Longtooth in the official one, Strength by 2, Dex by 1. Remember, in Wayfinder's Guide, your Dex was already 1 by being a shifter, and the Longtooth gave you Strength by 2. So in that regard, the numbers are going to come out the same way, okay? You have Fierce, which is proficiency and intimidation, same thing here. And then you have your shifting feature, which is 1d6 plus your strength mod. Instead of bludgeoning, it's the same thing. It basically, your unarmed strikes become more lethal. Now, Swift Stride, your Dex and Charisma scores each increase by 1. And remember, this is in Wayfinders, picking the original shifter gave you another Dex of 1. So here, though, the Swift Stride, your Dex goes by 2 and Charisma by 1. It actually comes out to be the same thing. Okay. Graceful. Acrobatics, good. Shifting feature. But check this out. Shifting feature. In Wayfinders, while shifted, your walking speed increases by an additional 5 feet, and then additionally you can move 10 feet as a reaction, blah, blah, blah. Here, you can move 10 feet as a reaction, but while shifted, your walking speed increases by 10 feet. So being the Swift Stride in the official new version, the Rising from the Last War, is a little bit better in that regard. You have more movement speed. Wild Hunt, Wisdom increases by 2, the base of Dex of 1. The official version, Wisdom by 2, Dex of 1. It comes out to be the same thing. Proficiency and Survival, good to go. But Mark the Scent is a bonus action. You can mark one creature you see within 10 feet, so on and so forth. That's gone. There's nothing. Wild Hunt just has the shifted feature. Oh, big difference. The shifting feature, while shifted, you have advantage on wisdom checks. That's what the Wild Hunt says in Wayfinders. Here, while shifted, you have advantage on wisdom checks. And no creature within 30 feet of you can make an attack roll with advantage against you unless you're incapacitated. That's huge. Huge difference. Yes, you don't have Mark of the Scent, but you can't no creature within 30 feet can make attack roll with advantage against you. Your just awareness is that good. So Wild Hunt is definitely, I think, because of that alone, is definitely better in the new version. But there's those differences. Now let's get into the big boy. The Warforged. I've heard a lot of stink about this, and as I read through it, I think, even though I haven't played the game much, and I've never run a campaign in it, when I played, I did play a Warforged. So here's the biggest ones. I kind of won't go over every little detail. Ability score increase, basically going to be kind of this, well, here, your con increases by 1, but the reason why is you would get additional stats as a Warforged because you would pick one of 3 subraces, either an Envoy, a Juggernaut, or a Skirmisher. That's what happened in Wayfinders, Unearthed Arcana, Old School 3.5, the original Eberron. Here, your con goes up by 2, and the one other ability score, your choice, increases by 1. That's it. There is no longer the Envoy, the Juggernaut, or the Skirmisher. There are not differences and variabilities in the Warforged anymore in the official Rising from the Last War. You're just a Warforged straight up. I didn't play it enough to digest that, but it sounds like that could be a big thing. You're removing some options there, so I'm not sure. I'm sure there's enough conversation on why they did that, but now it's just gone. Okay. Yes, the other stuff, alignment, size, speed, so on and so forth. But here's another big one. If we look back, you have the Warforged Resilience. You were created to have remarkable fortitude. Advantage on saves against poison. You have resistance to poison damage. Advantage on saves. Okay, they just named it Constructed Resilience instead of Warforged Resilience. Immune to disease. You don't need to... Yeah, it's kind of the same stuff. Century's Rest. I believe that's here as well. Take a long rest. Yeah, okay. But here's another huge, huge one. There used to be something called Integrated Protection, where, if I understand it well, your body has built-in defensive layers. This is in Wayfinders, previous stuff. Determine your armor class. You gain no benefit from wearing armor, but if you're using a shield, you get to apply its bonus. You can alter your body to enter different defensive modes. Each time you finish a long rest, you get to basically choose something from this table to give you some different stuff. It's changed. That table is gone. You can't change this anymore. Now, your body has built-in defensive layers, which you can enhance with armor. You just gain a flat +1 bonus to armor class. You can don only armor with which you have proficiency. To don it, you must incorporate it into your body over the course of an hour, during which you remain in contact with that armor. To doff it, take it off, you must spend 1 hour removing it. You can rest while donning or doffing armor in this way. And while you live, your armor can't be removed from your body against your will. So instead of having that variety again and those options of Wayfinder's Guide and previous Warforged stuff of sub-races, and also the integrated protection where after a long rest, depending on what environment maybe you're going into, you need to be a little more sneaky. You used to be able to kind of change the makeup and use kind of this darkwood core versus heavy plating to allow you not to have any issues with stealth. Now you just put armor on like a normal class, which mechanically just sounds a little, aesthetically or something, maybe just sounds a little wonky in how it handles that way. But it's now just sort of a little more flat. So it feels like in essence of keeping things a little more simplified, which is maybe they remove those options. Now, here's the interesting thing, though. We're looking at the differences from Wayfinder's Guide, which was already brought into the 5th edition rule set. I understand if you're bringing something from 3.5 into 5th, because the crunch of 3.5 is not in 5th edition. 5th edition has become a little more mainstream, user-friendly for newbies, right? New DMs, new players. So I understand the simplification. But you already had the kind of the complexities in 5th edition, and people messed with it. So something happened in playtest or whatever that we just left that out. But that's the big changes from Warforged. So I'll kind of reiterate that one more time. The integrated protection is different, and you lost all those sub-races. So that's a big one for the Warforged changes. Are there other races? You have tieflings, of course, and again, anything that's sort of already in the player's handbook, it just kind of gives you some descriptions. Let's move on. Dragonmarks. I can obsess about these forever. So Dragonmarks, the essence of them are, there's I think 12, and they are attached. They're very racially, they're restrictive now. They're tied to specific houses. So, for example, like let's say the Mark of Healing. Okay, this is what, it has some really cool artwork. Let me see if I can show you right there. So it has these cool, they're like really fancy tattoos that can possibly glow and look a little more vibrant. Okay, so the Dragonmarks, the essence of it is there's these sort of houses, right? Imagine them as sort of corporations, and they're kind of the umbrella, similar to like the guilds in Ravnica. And they oversee kind of all of the moving parts of Eberron, the entirety of the world, right? So they oversee business, they oversee trade, they oversee banking, so on and so forth, like the guilds of Ravnica. And kind of to bring it down a little more to like the real person street level, all these sort of corporations, if you will, are led by houses, okay? Names like, so the Mark of Detection is associated with House Medani and so on. Members of the house may often, not all of them, they can oftentimes exhibit and reveal that they've got marks on their body, which are dragon marks. Now, they manifest into actual, having a dragon mark gives you actual spell abilities that you can kind of cast from them. And oftentimes they work well with the business that that house is in. So, for example, like the Mark of Healing, it's a mark of House Jurasco. And this is basically, the Healers Guild provides a vital service to all of Khorvaire. And the last war ensured there was great need for healers. But the Mark of Healing gives you access to these spells. Those that have the mark can cast spells from that mark. So it's kind of goes one and the same in that the mark allows the members of that house to do whatever it is their business is as a organization better than others normally, right? So how it applies to the player level, that's kind of the background of it, and I know it's just kind of rambly and loose, but there's enough information on Google, your dragon marks, right? The way it applies to players is now what you have is players can get dragon marks, and what you do is you're restrictive, so in order to have the Mark of Healing, so what it does is it gives you access to these spells and whatnot, but you have to be a halfling. You're not going to get the Mark of Healing in another way. And it says here, if you're a halfling with the Mark of Healing, you have this sub-race. So instead of choosing like Lightfoot or whatever the other halfling was from Player's Handbook as a sub-race, you now choose the halfling that has the Mark of Healing on you. But in that, you want to start tying into the background, the new background that's available, which is something called the House Agent, which basically is you've sworn fealty to a Dragon Mark house. If you have a dragon mark, you're likely a member of one of the house's influential families. So because you make that choice in character creation of, I want to have a dragon mark, I want to be able to have these abilities, they will often become your new subrace, or, as is the case with certain things, I think it's like the as a half-orc or a human, if your half-orc or human has the mark of finding, the following traits replace the character's racial traits in the player's handbook, aside from age, alignment, size, and speed. So you're still a half-orc as is. Of course, storyline-wise, you figure out why and how the half-orcs fit within the world of Eberron. But you now get all of this stuff. But because you have that mark, that sort of indicates that you are a member and affiliated in some way with House Thrashk. And as such, you will pick the house agent background to see sort of how you link in, because you're bearing this mark that shows that you're a member of that house. So you're kind of attached in that way, which is a cool thing because it gives the DM some fuel as, you know, some stuff to springboard off of as to your role within the world and whatnot. So that's pretty neat. So that's how those work. Now, there is something called Aberrant Dragonmarks, which is a feat you'd have to take. And basically, the prerequisite is you can't have any other dragon mark, and you've manifested basically a dragon mark that you can make up what you want it to look like, but otherwise it's not affiliated to any house. You just have a mark that gives you the following things. Your con goes up, you learn a cantrip of your choice from the sorcerer's spell list. When you cast the first level spell through the mark, you can expend a hit die and roll it to gain temporary hit points and so on. And then you pick a flaw that goes along with it. Like every time you use it, you're in pain more, or animals are uneasy around you, so on and so forth. So you can have... Dragon marks are a big thing in Eberron. They signify like you're a member of a house and you're blessed by the power of a dragon mark. I mean, that says a lot, you know, both in roleplay and mechanically. So you can definitely choose that as options in character creation. But you have to adhere to the dwarf subrace. If you're a half-elf, you can't have the Mark of Warding because it's the dwarves of this place, of House Kundarak, that exemplified the Mark of Warding and whatnot. So you have some restrictions on that. But they're options, and they become sort of new subraces. So even though we're looking at Eberron's version of Kalashtar and Changelings and Warforged, and of course you have the different monstrous races, there's even more new stuff because you might now be a halfling with a dragon mark. So you are no longer a lightfoot or a stout halfling or whatever it's called. You have this specific aspect about you. So that's kind of a really cool thing. The new class, the Artificer. Pretty cool. You know, I like it. I haven't obviously played it. I've never done it in either Unearthed Arcana, so the sort of playtest version of it or anything like this. It's basically you get a D8. You're kind of, but you also have light armor, medium armor, and shield. So you're kind of stacked, but you're sort of an intelligence-based caster guy because your spells and the things you use are based off of intelligence. So you're kind of a little more of a heavy armored castery dude, but you cast differently. You have access to your own spell list. Now, there's nothing new in here for spells. There aren't new Eberron spells, which kind of can suck. All of these spells are taken from either Player's Handbook and or Xanathar's. If you don't have Xanathar's or access to it, of course, I'm fortunate that I have all the content on D&D Beyond. You need Xanathar's to be able to have access to all the different spells you get, and they're marked here by the asterisk. So there's your spell list. You go all the way up to level 5. And basically what happens is, as an Artificer, you use tools when you cast your spells. When describing your spellcasting, think about how you're using a tool to perform the spell effect. If you cast Cure Wounds using alchemist supplies, you could be quickly producing a salve. If you cast it using Tinkerer's tools, you might have a miniature mechanical spider that binds wounds. When you cast Poison Spray, you could fling foul chemicals or use a wand that spits venom. The effect of the spell is the same as for a spellcaster of any other class, but your method of spellcasting is special. The same principle applies when you prepare your spells. As an Artificer, you don't study a spellbook or pray to prepare your spells. Instead, you work with your tools and create the specialized items you'll use to produce your effects. If you replace Cure Wounds with Heat Metal, you might be altering the device you use to heal. Perhaps modifying a tool so that it channels heat instead of healing energy. Such details, this is what I like. They don't limit you in any way or provide you with any benefit beyond the spell's effects. You don't have to justify how you're using tools to cast a spell. But simply describing your spellcasting creatively is a fun way to distinguish yourself from other spellcasters. That's the sort of roleplay and thematic essence of what the Artificer is about. So as I said, you have spells, you have normal slots and all this stuff. You just manifest it and show it in a different way. And that's what sort of separates the Artificer from the Wizard or the Sorcerer or whatnot. Now, on that note as well, you've got these spell lists, like I said, all from Player's Handbook and Xanathar's. And then you also have these things called infusions. Your chart, your table here shows you how many infusions you get. You can change them out every time you level up, I believe. Similar to like what you can do with like certain cantrips, right? And then you get more as you level up. And then how many items can you have infused at any one time? There's a chart for that as well. And basically what you do is you pick from this list of infusions. There's a lot. Boots of the Winding Path, they have prerequisites at times. So, for example, this one, you have to be a 6th level Artificer. And you can only infuse them onto a pair of boots. While wearing these boots, a creature can teleport up to 15 feet as a bonus action to an unoccupied space. So, let's say at 6th level, let's look back up at the chart. You've got, at 6th level, you know 6 infusions, and you can have 3 infused at any one time. Let's just say that's one of the ones I have, is I have this boot thing. Boots of the Winding Path, whatever. I pick Enhanced Defense, Enhanced Weapons, so on and so forth. I basically, the way you infuse is you spend, at the end of a long rest, I think it is, you spend time with that item, so the boots, right? At the end of the long rest, I just want to put Boots of the Winding Path infusion on these boots. Now, the cool thing is, immediately after doing that, if you want to, since it tells you that it requires attunement, without spending any extra time, you can immediately attune to those boots. If you want to wait till later, you have to do the normal 1-hour attunement process, or if you give the boots to someone else, they have to spend the normal attunement process. But that's it. The boots are infused, period. And while wearing that at any time, I mean, it doesn't go off. It's a permanent thing. But remember, if I do that to the boots, and then among my 6 different infusion options I have, and there's, a few, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's a big one. That replicates magic items at 9, 10, 11. You have 11 that you can choose from. Only 3 items at any one time can be infused. If you do it, overdo it, like a 4th one, it's going to override whatever the first one that you did was, the oldest one. Okay? So you're restricted by how many you can have affected, so to speak. And of course, you still have to be limited by attunement slots. If some of these, like this one, to put repeating shot on something, that item, which is a simpler martial weapon with the ammunition property, it requires attunement. Now, one of the cool things about the Artificer class himself is the baseline Artificer, you get Flash of Genius, you get all these other abilities. So you have Tool Expertise at 7th level, you get that ability. I'll just let you read it. When you reach 10th level, you can attune up to 4 magic items at once. When you reach 14th level, you can attune up to 5 magic items. At 20th level, you gain a +1 bonus to all saving throws per magic item you're currently attuned to. So you can start attuning to, you just have a better way with magic and magic items. So that's a kind of a cool thing. Now, there are, of course, specialists, so sort of subclasses. You can be an Artificer, and then you will choose to be either an Alchemist. I'll let you kind of research the stuff on that. I'll just scroll through it. And I'll let you pause the video as you need. You can be an Artillerist. I don't like the artwork here because it's all about, to me, not all about, but you get this Eldritch Cannon. You basically get a turret. And there's nothing that screams to me on this piece of artwork that this guy makes me excited about picking an Artillerist at all. And then you can be a Battlesmith, which this is kind of cool. You get the freaking Armored Mastiff pet at 3rd level. So you've got those 3 Artificer options, but that's the essence of the Artificer, is you get to put things into items and they kind of create that effect that would otherwise maybe be a spell, like an Expeditious Retreat concept, but instead you infuse it into a fixed amount of items that you can have. So there's the new Artificer class. What's next? You have a group patron. That's kind of basically, think of it from the DM's perspective, whether you're sort of attached to a certain one of the houses, one of the Dragonmark houses, or, you know what I mean? There's a lot of ways you can go with it. The Adventurers Guild, the Crime Syndicate, an espionage agency. They're just flavor and ways that as a DM you can kind of create story cohesiveness so that your group is kind of together, all working under a certain organization. And the group, again, you don't have to use it, but it just presents a bunch of, there's an entire section on a bunch of different ways and options of kind of helping to bring the group together. So rather than an individual character choice, here's a way that we can kind of springboard off of to say that you work for this group, so on and so forth. So that's a really neat bit that was added in as well. Next, Chapter 2, and I know that we spent all this time, we haven't even got to Chapter 2 yet, but I'll be faster over time. Chapter 2 is the Khorvaire Gazetteer, where it basically gives you all the information on the Nations of Khorvaire, so the main continent. There are other places outside of, I'm going to show you real quick on the map. Let's see if I can zoom into this. So this is the map that came in the book. You don't get any, obviously you're getting a digital version on D&D Beyond, so you're not going to get something that you can pull out of it. I can't rip the map off screen. I can definitely look online and copy and paste that stuff and print it out. But here's the map of Khorvaire itself, which is the main continent where all the action kind of happens. But on the back side, you can see there's planets and stuff like this. And Khorvaire is one of them. So, yes, and I'll show you what I mean with the content. There's other stuff that can be happening there. This is kind of like putting a board game away. Like, I can never get it back, packed up the way it was. So I'm about to mess this up. Like I said, when I ripped it out of the book, I screwed it up. You know what? It's refresher time. So the way everything is presented is, Chapter 2, you're dealing with the Nations of Khorvaire. And it gives you the main nations. It shows you the capital. What are the hallmarks? So what are they known for? And it gives you just sort of a brief few paragraphs of kind of giving you the essence of what this place is about. It goes further and says, here's some interesting things about it. Arcanics is the most prestigious academy of magic in Khorvaire. Most of its sages specialize in ritual magic and abstract theory. Magic permeates many aspects of Ondarian life, more so than other nations. A cleansing stone, which is a new thing, graces every village, and you might blah, blah, blah. And then it talks about characters. Regardless of your intelligence score, as an Ondarian, you're sure you're the smartest person in the room. Consider the following characteristics. Arcane talent. These aren't necessarily mechanical things that need to change on your sheet. So it isn't as though you pick a human and you have all these different things that are on your sheet that's different from, a half-elf. And now, depending on where you're from, you get new stuff to add. No, they're more of like role-play flavor thematic things. Like, for example, if you're not going to play a magic using class, consider creating a high elf or a human with the magic initiate feat. Whether you favor damage-dealing cantrips or more utilitarian ones, every Ondarian should know a little magic. Why use your hand when you could use Mage Hand? Don't settle for common clothes and a squalid meal when you could wear Glamour Weave. So they're just kind of giving you the vibe of what characters from that region might be about, and they kind of can help inform the sort of character you want to play, especially leading towards backgrounds and such. So that's a pretty cool touch. I like that, because also from the DM perspective, that gives me an idea on the NPCs that might be coming from that region. And then you have the cities and sites where it talks about, again, a quick sort of paragraph on here's Arcanics, Fairhaven, Passage, Stormhome, so on. And then the big one is the aftermath of the last war. That's the one I talked about earlier, where that's sort of where we are in the world. If the war is over, what happened to the people and the places as a result of this war? Both what's happening now in that it's kind of at a lull, sort of a quiet, non-warlike atmosphere, but also like what are the ramifications of 80, 90, 100 years of war? Every one of the places within the nations give you kind of how this region, this nation has responded and what they're like. And that's a little bit longer. And then again, you get into the next one, Breland. You'll notice there's the capital. Here's the hallmarks of the place, a quick introduction and general theme of what it's like. Here's some interesting things in bullet point format. Here's what the characters from this area might be like. Here's a little quick few paragraphs on the cities and sites of importance. And then beyond that, what's the aftermath of the last war? And as I said, it does that treatment for everything. Okay, some a little bit more wordy than others, but it gives you, so from a content standpoint, I don't want to say it's necessarily plug and play, and I'd be a little bit careful if you're a new DM running in this, because it leaves a lot of room for the DM to go where they want, but the DM has to put in some work here. There's some legwork, if I want to run something in the Black Pit, this is all I kind of have to go on. Yes, I can go back to older content. Like I said, look in the 3.5 version to see, Google it quite simply to see what else has changed and what's different. But it lets you extrapolate from there. So the content in this book, from a dungeon master point of view, is more inspiration and fuel to springboard off of. If you don't have that creativity to kind of go from there, you're not being provided with a railroad. You're not being provided with a module. This is not Curse of Strahd out of the abyss. Read this to your players. This is how it works. But I like that because it allows me to sort of just let my mind wander and brainstorm and figure out which setting, as I said in the very beginning, an hour ago now, which might fit best for my campaign, where I want to go. So it does that for the whole Khorvaire Gazetteer, okay? You do get into distant lands, which is the ones on the other side of the map, like I said. They're not the continent of Khorvaire that's typically been seen or used. But, if you look at this map, there's potentially a lot that can be going on here. But here's where you have a lot of jungles and whatnot. And what it does is instead it gives you just a little bit. In Arenal, you might consult an elven archmage who's been dead for 20,000 years, battle sinister forces that have crawled into Eberron from a realm of eternal night, or learn secrets of magic unknown in Khorvaire on the main sort of continent. And it gives you just a little bit. It gives you a little picture. and then some notable locations and their influence. So that other continent, how has it affected anything that's going on in Khorvaire? In Khorvaire, you might team up with an agent of the Undying Court to bring down a powerful vampire, or you might be summoned by a deathless sage who needs your help to fulfill an ancient prophecy, or you might have a bargain with a merchant offering rare magic items coming from there. And it just gives you a good way of how the distant lands tie into. And it does that for Arganessen, which is kind of the ancient land of dragons, Kyber, which is kind of the Underdark, and the North and South Pole. So it's cool touch that it gives you. I mean, there's a lot here on the map, but bulk of the book is on Khorvaire and the main continent and everything that happens there. But it gives you enough if you want to springboard off of and create a campaign or a bunch of content there on the distant lands, okay? And it even gives you, charts and things you can roll on sometimes. So that's pretty cool. Chapter 3 is kind of the same flow and vibe of presenting you information, except it's entirely on Sharn, which is the main city of, it's the Waterdeep, if you will. It's the sigil from Planescape and so on. So Sharn, the City of Towers. It has been said in other reviews and people that have really delved into, not just the new content here, of course. I don't know anybody that's run a full campaign in Rising from the Last War. The damn thing just came out. But in old stuff, there's enough content within this section of Chapter 3 of Sharn that you can have almost a Ravnica thing, where all of your campaign can take place within the city, and that's it. Because there's a lot going on with space, above and below and whatnot. So there's a lot here with Sharn. And then also as an introduction, in Chapter 4, there's an adventure to help kind of get your feet wet in Eberron that starts players at level 1, that starts in the city of Sharn. So there's and that's one where it's an actual read this to your players, so on. It's a full-blown adventure. So that's kind of cool that it offers that for DMs that want to dabble into it and see if their players like the world. So that's Chapter 3 is Sharn. Okay. Chapter 4, Building Eberron Adventures. This is just fuel. I don't want to go over this one too much because the video is getting unwieldy. But adventure themes. So you want to use villains as your theme. Here's ways to do it, right? It oftentimes will give you charts if you can pick or just roll randomly to kind of start. The randomization of things like this, I roll a d6, it just gives me fuel. And that's all I'm doing is I'm springboarding off of this stuff. So there's just certainly a lot here. I don't need to go over. I'm just simply telling you content-wise, there's a lot here. If you want to run something based on the cults, on the Dragonmark houses, you want to get into the Dreaming Dark. Maybe you want to have something about a specific villain. You want to look at Drome or the various goblinoid clans, bugbears and whatever. There's a lot here, and it's all just fuel. Stuff that can just spark my ooh, I like that. There's a story there. I can run with it from there. You notice there aren't any read this to your players things. Go where you want with it. I think dabbling a bit into the history and those paragraphs of the nations and what this is about, and then going into what style of adventure you want, you can certainly piece together some campaigns and some content for sure. So that's where that goes. And then you have some bit on the last war and so on, and the various groups. It talks about the planes. I don't want to get into that too much, but there's a little bit there. There's that adventure I talked about. You then get into treasures. So there are certainly some new magic items and various things that exist. You have a pretty high level of technology to a certain extent. It does mention, though, that it doesn't necessarily have to have guns. If that's not a part of your world, the firearms, suggestions in the DMG, then you don't need to have it here as well. Again, if you don't want to run the more sci-fi pulp Indiana Jones leading into that high fantasy aspect and you want to run the Mournland real dark, gritty, you can eliminate all of the high fancy stuff, and just have it a little more old school and just dirty. Dark Sun-esque, right? So you've got all these different new magic items that you can kind of dabble in and look at. And finally, you've got the kind of bestiary. Friends and foes. So if I was to do a quick, what do I get? Let's do monsters. Advanced filters, category. Source. Let's see if it's up yet. There it is. Filter. So this is filtered by Eberron Rising from the Last War only. I think there's always 20. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 at Expeditious Messenger. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. 40. 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46 new monster things. And I think these are, if we're looking at it, It's not just a reskin of, we're just putting a gorilla here. No, these are all entirely new things. Okay, and a lot of them get into, like, you got this thing called a Warforged Colossus. There's an entire map, I don't want to spoil anything, where you can go, kind of adventure into the Warforged Colossus. Like, that's some nights of gameplay, if not a mini half campaign there, of just going to the Warforged Colossus are large, gargantuan-sized things that roam, think Pacific Rim style, that have roamed around, like, the Mournland and were in there during the battles, and then, like, now they're just a husk. Hell, you know what? I gotta show it to you. This is all stuff just within the Mournland, if you want to build an adventure in that. There's a lot of craziness in that place. Come on. There it is. Check this out. I mean, that arm is, 5 feet? So, you know what I mean? Like, there he is. You can scavenge and sort of... I mean, that sounds to me like a lot of Warhammer, 40K, where the whole mission and adventure is just wandering through a space Hulk. You know what I mean? So you've got a lot going on with that alone. I mean, that's just going through... I mean, there's a story there. There's a campaign, or an adventure there, of let's just find this old husk of this Pacific Rim-looking robot that's now, emptied out and is a shell of its former self. But what's in there? What things, what treasures, items, so on and so forth. So you've got, 40-something new monsters. And then as far as magic items, let me see if I have a source that I can kind of get through equipment. Back up. Magic items. I'm going to try and do source. That's the beauty of this. So I'm filtered by only stuff that's inside of Eberron Last Rising. So again, there's 20 on a page. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. There's 33 new magic items in this book as well. And you run the gamut from, there's very rare, legendary, uncommon, an earworm, whatever the hell that is. To attune to... Why do you want to attune to an earworm? Finder's goggles. It mentioned Glamour Weave before. If you're from that nation, why would you not wear this? Imbued with harmless illusory magic. While wearing the common version of these clothes, you can use the bonus action to create a moving illusionary pattern within the cloth, of course. So, you can have butterflies. You know what that reminds me of? If you ever played, just look at some gameplay of Guild Wars 2 and the Mesmer. The way they play and move, it's beautiful. That's what this kind of screams to me. So, there it is. Actually, wait a minute. My bad, guys. The source is Wayfinder's Guide on that one. But it's still in here either way, I think, right? Because even though I'm filtering by... I guess that's where it first came about. Because this doesn't have any... I'm filtering by official books. It's just something that was previously in Wayfinder's Guide, so... I know there's a lot of other comparisons of what was in the book and what was not, but I just wanted to go over the differences in the new races and stuff like that, and what's changed. Here's another thing, though, and this is one I'm going to pull up real quick. This is going to be really helpful, and I'm going to end the video after that. KeithBaker.com. And I hope I'm just highlighting his stuff and I'm not trying to step on any of his toes or anything like this. So I hope I can show this stuff. So he talks about blah, blah, blah. What's changed? And this is the guy who made the world. So there's got to be some, and he's involved in the creation of this new book. So it's not like he just handed it all off and let WotC do whatever they want with it. What's changed? First and foremost, Eberron Rising from the Last War brings the world of Eberron to 5th edition. It's been 10 years since Eberron was released for 4th, and the goal was never to change the world, but rather introduce it to people who might never have encountered it. With this in mind, one thing that hasn't changed is the timeline. However, he's going to go on, so I would maybe take a look at his blog site or whatever and see what he writes on this stuff. He's going to discuss each of these in more detail, but the M-War dwarves, they've expanded on a piece of dwarven history in the new Eberron Rising from the Last War book. I mentioned the races changes that were made. Following the precedent of the Wayfinder's Guide to Eberron, Dragonmarks are now a sub-race option. I mentioned that. That's what's one big change. Rising from the Last War has an extensive section on the Mournland, providing a lot of material for running adventures in the ruins of Seer. In 3.5, it was asserted that there were a few absolute rules that applied to the Mournland, specifically that healing didn't function. So, This is elaborated on in the new book. Chapter 6 includes a stat block for Lady Ilmarrow, an infamous lich. Cool. There's monsters. But a number of little changes to the monsters from the lore. Guns. Their approach to guns hasn't changed at all, but it now says the artillerist specializes in creating arcane artillery. But it says here, if you use the firearm rules in the DMG. So I like that it just keeps constantly saying you are still free to kind of use different variants from other places. I mean, obviously, we're still using spells and stuff from Xanathar's Guide. Now, what's new? The Artificer's new. Group Patrons is new. The Warforged Colossus thing I just talked about is new. And then a bunch of scary monsters. So that just kind of shows you what's different than what content we may already have. But all told, I'm going to end it now with, I already revealed my hand to you. Content is a 5 out of 5. This is my final score. I think it's worth a look. If you're the type of DM that's willing to put in a little bit of work and extrapolate from there and create your own stories and your own worlds and not be entirely handheld, but still have enough fuel, there are multiple campaigns worth of content within this new Eberron rising from the last war book. I know that was a long one, but I appreciate everyone for watching. As I said, I will give you all of the timestamps that I can to help you efficiently navigate your way through and pick and choose what you want. That's all I have for you folks. Thanks everyone for watching, and take care.